here while we can. Doesn't necessarily mean it's the bill that we're going to jump on and do, exclusive to anything else right away, but it seemed like it would be a good opportunity and a bill that we might be interested in having a conversation about. So, Representative Mahaly, if you want to join us at the table right at the end there in that comfortable looking folding chair.
Yeah, I see you having the hot seat for your.
We don't have the luxurious space that you do in room 11 downstairs, but we welcome you to what we do have. And so I'm just going to turn it over to you. And I think most of us probably don't even know what the bill is, unless you happen to be looking through, this morning as they were being referred to us. So if you want to just tell us a little bit about, we have a half hour, so as much time as you want to spend going over it, and just give us a quick introduction.
Thank you. I'm Mark Mahaly. I represent Calais, Plainfield, Marshfield, and I'm on the Appropriations Committee. And usually they don't let us out of the room. This is actually a problem I didn't know anything about. I'm until I was brought into a room with about a half dozen very angry constituents, and I learned about this issue. Here's what happens. So you're home, let's say you own some land, maybe a lot, maybe a little. Some guys come and they knock on your door and they introduce themselves. They're, loggers, and they, Representative Lipsky, you're going to correct me or add, please, because I know you're familiar with this.
Doing well.
They knock on your door. We happen to be in the neighborhood. We have a little free time. Do you want any timber harvesting? And very often people will say, they're trusting. They'll say, sure. See those trees over there? That's a stand of softwood. It can just go, or whatever. And then they'll bring their equipment onto the land, and then they'll start cutting, and they'll keep cutting. They just keep going. Maybe the individual has signed a contract, which they didn't read, and maybe not. Very, very often not. And they'll go out to these people and say, hey guys, what are you doing? I told you this. And the guys will say, well, we're keeping going. And if you don't like it, they'll actually physically threaten them. And it's quite overtly threaten them. And then they'll cut more than they should. And they'll say, don't worry, we'll pay you. They take it. And of course they never pay. And this kind of activity, which I would call white collar crime with a blue collar, it really is, people get angry. So sometimes, most of the time, people don't get any recompense at all. But sometimes some people spend enough money to hire a lawyer and sue these people. And the people argue that they have a contract, or that they really were told to cut all that stuff and whatever. And it ends up into quite a complicated piece of litigation. But there have been landowners who win, and they get judgments for tens of thousands of dollars against these guys. Or the matter is referred to the Attorney General or state's attorney. Generally, the state's attorneys sort of thought it's a civil matter and tell people go hire a lawyer. But the Attorney General has brought litigation, and in fact, gotten fines. These people have been sued successfully and fined. And here's the problem. They don't pay the fines. They don't pay the judgments. In Vermont, in many states, if you don't pay a fine, you go to jail. Well, one initiates a contempt proceeding, and if you just continue not to pay, you go to jail until you do. Here, the state refers it to a collection agency, which sends a nasty letter out, and they don't pay any attention to the letters. As to the fines, the state has seizure power but doesn't do it, doesn't feel comfortable. The Department of Forest Parks and Rec actually has in one case tried to seize equipment, but guess what? It didn't belong to them, it belonged to their mother. Or it belonged to another, they create a shell corporation. They're not unintelligent in their approach. The equipment is owned by somebody else. Am I doing okay, Jen?
You're doing well.
Okay. Well, he's a logger, so I mean, anyway, people are really angry and frustrated, and a lot of the people who are frustrated are loggers because these people, and there's not very many of them, but everybody knows who they are, give logging a bad name. They give loggers a bad name. So I went and met with the Attorney General, and I met with the Department of Forest Parks and Recreation, and I met with their counsel. And it's really amazing when you're in the room, everybody's pissed. Everybody's frustrated at the sort of inability to get at these guys. So I started thinking, what can we do? The problem, in part, is that there are two relevant laws. If you look at the bill, it seems pretty technical, but I can explain it very simply. What the bill does, and it took me a while to figure this out, and I had help from Rory Thibault, who now is Judge Thibault. He was he was a good thought partner. What it does is it says, if you have outstanding, because of course, remember, we want to be very surgical. I don't want to make life difficult for loggers generally. I want to go for these bad actors. That's what they are. It says, if you have unpaid fines or unpaid judgments, you can no longer log at all. Unless you do one of two things. One, you go to work for somebody else who's a legitimate logger and tell them about your history, inform the Attorney General, and that somebody else can't be your mother. It has to be someone unrelated. It can't be a shell corporation. It has to be really a legitimate logger. Or you post a $50,000 bond with the AG. Okay? Well, I think it's and the AG, anybody who does have outstanding bonds, unpaid fines or judgments, gets notified by the AG of this. My own view is that it's very likely that these kinds of scofflaws will do nothing.
Yeah.
And continue to log. In which case, the bill then gives the authority to the AG to go after them. That's a crime. In other words, we don't have to wait for them to swindle somebody else. The mere act of logging at all without having gotten a bond is a crime. It's just a crime to continue logging if you have unpaid judgments, more than one. You have to have a couple unpaid judgments or fines, and you don't go to work for a legitimate logger or put up a bond. That's a crime, punishable by some prison time, fines, and seizure. That's the other thing. The AG has always had some power to seize. This makes it clear. They can seize equipment, they can sell the equipment. So is this the best be all and end all? No. I mean, these people who are deliberate scofflaws are very difficult to deal with. But I'm hopeful that this bill gives the AG and private parties the power to really, really do something with these very few people. I want to thank Danny Fitzko, who is the Commissioner of Forest Parks and Rec. She's been really helpful to me. I've met with her, the Professional Loggers Northeast, which is an association of loggers, has met with me, given comments on this bill, and I think is supportive. I think they'll be supportive. And former commissioners, a former commissioner of Forest Parks and Rec will be supportive. My goal really is to make it very clear that this is kind of a very focused effort to go after a serious problem that's cost people hundreds of thousands of dollars, and make it easier for the AG to act. So that's a quick description.
But thank you. Let's see whether people have questions. Representative Levitt.
I'm curious, can you speak to how prevalent this is throughout the state, or is it?
No, it's Northeast Kingdom.
It's just, I was wondering.
It's the King, to my knowledge, it's focused in my area, Marshfield, Plainfield, Callis, we're kind of in the north, also in the Kingdom. But I don't know about elsewhere. I think the short answer to the question is I'm not sure.
Okay, I was just curious. I mean, it seems like a kingdom problem.
Judd, do you know, is it?
I can share my perspective on that question. And I want to predicate that by, you've heard me last year, how strongly I advocate for the people who make a living in the forest. And I have, full disclosure, worked with Sam Lincoln and Dana Dorn, who's the executive director of the Professional Loggers Council of the Northeast. It was formerly the Professional Loggers Council of Maine, and we've joined forces. And it is a very, they represent only loggers or log truckers. But from my lifetime of logging, there have been outlaws, pirates, thieves, and they're in Pennsylvania, they're in New York State, they're all over. They're not representative, they are not a strong faction, they're an extreme minority. Those of us who are very proud of our profession and its responsibilities are offended. These are not loggers, these are thieves, they're outlaws. And to Representative, Mahaley, they are smart. I'm not saying they went past 8th grade or 12th grade or whatever, but they are wily, but they're pathological predators. And they prey on people that are either absentee owners or they think are naive. I've had confrontations in my life with these people. I'm one of the few certified master loggers in Vermont, and there is a 9-point oath of responsibilities and ethics that we are required. And that organization and this PLC of the Northeast, which I'm on the advisory board to, I will report, because we had a meeting down in Hartford at Longview at Jack Bell's place. And it was a unanimous consensus that we want to support this bill, not as token, but because it's critical to the integrity of our profession. So I have communicated as recently as yesterday evening, and the real crisis has been the lack of enforcement. I've gone to county foresters. I've gone to state's attorneys and say, you shoplift or you go pull an auto off some dealership or used car lot, you're going to get prosecuted. There are damages of theft that far exceed the value of a car. And nobody has the guts or the teeth. To Mark's point, some of these people are very hostile. And I've confronted a pack of them as an old man, but someone who sense. So it's a real issue. I think it's a very, very small segment of the profession. And anything that empowers, can get rid of or stop this continued abuse by a few rogue operators is a good thing for society, for the honor and responsibility of, forest managers or forest harvest, timber harvesters. So you don't get, I get no denial that this is a tragedy and it is a serious crime, and our society has failed to successfully prosecute. To your point, no legitimate contractor is going to hire. They know who these people are.
I just want to add one thing,
So that's I am respectful of what this bill is attempting to do.
part of my reaction when I got hauled into this room and told about this problem, angry people, including, by the way, Peter Youngbear, who was my predecessor was Janet Anson, and her predecessor was Peter. He got taken. We're trusting people here.
Yeah.
We just trust people. But the thing that really got me as a recovered lawyer and the dean of law school, ex-dean of the law school, people were saying to me, I don't believe in the law anymore. I mean, this is a predator state, things like that. People were saying, I can't trust the state anymore. They don't do anything. There's such a profound cynicism about things. And I just thought, this is not good. We got to do something about this. Even though it's a narrow problem, if we can put one of these guys in jail and take one of their big pieces of equipment, sell it, it'll speak worlds.
Representative Temple.
So I'm curious as to why we would wait for the second offense to implement this. Why not the first?
There's a technical reason. We're amending two pieces of law that exist, and they have bigger, sort of your second bite at the apple is kind of is when you're really grabbed under what's called the consumer fraud section. We added timber theft to the consumer fraud section, or land improvement fraud. That's when the AG comes after you. There's also this thing called timber trespass, and that civil litigation, someone can sue you under. And there, what we did is we said, either one, if you get one of one and one of the other. But the professional loggers were a little worried about a situation. Apparently you have a situation where, you know what it's like out there in the forest. A landowner says, cut here. And you go and you cut where you think they told you, but you're cutting on the neighbor's land, and then the neighbor sues you. And they're just worried a little that we do not make it, someone would get caught up in that. I personally think that's really unlikely. Our problem in Vermont is not over-aggressive enforcement. It's kind of like nobody's enforcing. And I don't think this will stop here. I mean, even if this bill passes, when it becomes law, the governor hopefully will sign it. We still have to make sure the AG brings the cases and that state's attorneys are educated that they just shouldn't tell people to go find a lawyer, that it's a criminal matter.
Right.
These people are outlaws.
Representative Lipsky.
There's one issue that I think the PLC of the Northeast has requested of Rep. Mahaley, and that has to do with a request that we made for a study of enforcement issues. Why, historically, why has the AG's office or police chiefs or any enforcement failed so miserably? Just so for our documentation and try to get a grip, trying to, end this predatory behavior. I think some knowledge on the enforcement issues is necessary.
Question of the chair. I confess this is the first bill that I have ever introduced, and consequently, I'm a little weak on the procedure. There have been requests for a study, and not only studying why don't we have enforcement, but studying should we license or register loggers, studying whether or not, which we don't. But this is a very delicate economic situation for the community. We have to be very careful about any burdens we put on them. Studying whether there should be some sort of notice of logging so that it would be a little more difficult, et cetera. And what I have told the professional loggers and others is, I have the language. It's there for a study. It has been reviewed by Danny Fitzko and by Dana, the professional loggers president. And I'm ready to provide it at any time. What I said to them was, if I see a real strong base support for that, well, then I'm happy to have the bill amended. I don't know if I have to do that, whether the committee can do that, or that's what I don't know.
Yeah, I'll answer your question indirectly or in a moment here. I think what we would normally do is, after hearing from you, we would ask the council to come in and walk through the bill, section by section, so that we can see exactly what's in there right now.
Right.
And then if there was a sense that the committee wanted to pursue it, then we would think about who else do we want to have come in and testify. And then in the course of that, there would be opportunity for the committee to make amendments. And so it wouldn't necessarily be you, but you could, if somebody came to you and it already has, obviously, in this situation, but if it was something you wanted to pursue, then we could have a conversation. You could talk to other members of the committee and see what the interest was there.
At any time you want, I'm happy to provide that language.
Great. Representative O'Brien.
How do, and maybe you know this too, Jed, since most of these loggers eventually, with this stolen property, we can call it, it reminds me of like stealing catalytic converters, for example, that they end up,
Right.
Somebody essentially is buying them and using them. How do the mills feel about this? Like, is there any way to exert some pressure on the mills, essentially saying, these are bad actors, you should be aware of buying logs from these? Can't be, how many operations are we talking here, like half a dozen or 20? I mean, I get no sense for how much
Of
people
rogue
operate.
operations?
Yeah, these sort of thief operations.
It's a small number, but what you're talking about is adding a clause or the language of what might be referred to as trip tickets. It has to do with documenting the chain of title from the landowner where the logs came from, and that is submitted to the mill, who the logger was, date they were delivered. So some documentation, because historically I've done business with a mill, and I can remember someone, whether it was intentional or not, the logger said it was unintentional. The landowner said they came on my land and they cut, ferocious northern red oak veneer, and they delivered it 9 miles down the road to a sawmill. When this landowner arrived and saw his woodlot devastated, he went after the logger, who didn't have 10 cents, went after the sawmill who received the product. So that happens, but if there's a policy that tracks the chain of title, and we'll have time to discuss this, and that was brought up at this Professional Loggers Council Northeast meeting I was in late December, mid to late December.
There is an organization, the Forest Products Association, which I think is, they'll have to speak for themselves. I've sent them copies of everything. I think they're more resistant to any change and more worried about all of this, but I concur. The problem is that whereas in Maine, for example, there's legislation that says when you log, you have to have a cut list, which specifies exactly what the law says what it has to contain. And then you have the cut list, which says the amount, what you're cutting, the type of tree, et cetera. Then you go to the mill. The mill gives you a mill slip, which duplicates the cut list in a way and says what they cut. Well, here it's much more informal. I've seen cut lists and you can barely read them. It just scribbles on a piece of paper, and that's the kind of the way we do business. I will only say that I don't know. I'd be certainly open to thinking about a requirement that mills not accept lumber, but these people go to Canada and out of state too.
Well,
Representative Graham.
This is not really a new problem because my father had it happen in the 50s where the guy was logging the neighbor's property. He just kept on going. He had to go to court, get a lawyer, and go to court to stop him. He got enough money out of it to pay the lawyer. That was it. Then there was another case in the 80s that I know of that a farmer had a sugar bush away from the farm. He went to go to start tapping in the spring. The trees were gone. And they could never figure out who did it. So it's not a new thing.
it is not.
No, it's not.
And it's under.
In a way, it seems like you would think that, yeah, maybe even in the past that was a practice and there was more lawlessness in the open frontier, and now we've evolved to a point where that wouldn't happen anymore, but it is.
Yeah, I'm discovering that we're a little bit still on the frontier here.
Yeah. Well, I'll let you get back to your committee because I'm sure you are
Still waiting for the BAA.
Waiting for the BAA hearing from.
But thank you for.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for even considering this, and I look forward to cooperating with the committee in any way I can, including providing copies of stuff of that other study. Thank you.
Thank you.
Much.
Right. Well, thanks, Mark. After promising earlier that we take a break every hour, I think we should probably take a break. So we can